Welcome to Laying Fallow. I'm Donna Von Bruning. Today I interview Caitlin McNulty. Caitlin went to high school in Mahomet, Illinois, and graduated from St. Louis University with a degree in psychology in May of 2024. Caitlin was born in Paris, France, and spent her childhood in France and Sweden. She returned to the United States for high school with her family. She currently works in human resources and lives in Chicago, Illinois. Tell me what COVID was like for you senior year. Like, what did your school do? How did they handle graduation, prom, all that kind of stuff? And tell me where you are in the world. Like, where was your high school? Where did you live?
Yeah, so let's see. I moved to Mahomet, Illinois, started 8th grade there, went to high school, and senior year was relatively normal, obviously, until March. And yeah, we went on spring break, supposed to be 2 weeks, and then just kept getting extended. So it became kind of just like a mess overall because, especially as a senior, I was in AP classes. I had AP tests to take. I had, people were still figuring out where they were going to college. So we started doing some online classes. It was just a mess. Nobody knew exactly what to do, and it's nobody's fault, but it was kind of just felt like a very weak ending to 4 years of high school.
So you went to a public high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did they give seniors the option, like sometime in March or April, say, you can opt out now? Like, these are your grades. They're not going to go lower. It's kind of pointless to continue these 6 weeks. Or did they make you continue on?
They made us continue. So it was hard to be, again, none of us had ever done school from home. And so it was a complete change of, okay, well, I'm in my room with all my stuff. I'm not here this is not where I pay attention and focus and that kind of thing. So it was difficult, especially for those AP tests, because then they changed up how we were going to take them. We were all expecting to be surrounded by peers. Instead, you're in your room, just, trying to, yeah, it was just a quick change and a very strange situation to be in. But then they had us do graduation kind of in person. So you signed up for a time block and you showed up and you waited in line 6 feet apart with your mask on. And then you walked slowly closer to the gym and you got your 2 minutes they filmed you walking across the stage and you flipped your tassel and then you put your mask back on and you walked to the front and they took a picture of you.
Where was your family for that?
At home.
Oh.
So they filmed it so then people could watch it later. And then they filmed the valedictorian speeches and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you could sit at home on your computer and watch yourself walk across the stage. So, I mean, my parents poured some champagne, made it a occasion, but yeah, so it was just kind of a strange way to end 4 years by just standing on a stage and staring into an open auditorium.
Weird. Did you guys watch it? Like you said, did your parents?
Yes, we did, because I messed up flipping my tassel, so they felt like they had to watch it. So, it made it a little special that I had a classic, graduation mishap, but I got definitely kind of strange overall.
What was your launch year like? Where did you go to school? What did you decide to do? Did any of this impact your decision?
Yeah, so I applied to a few different schools, and one of them was St. Louis University, where I ended up going. But when I toured back in the fall of my senior year, the summer before my senior year, I really wasn't sure. I was between a lot of different schools, and when my parents asked me about SLU, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to go for an extra scholarship or that kind of thing. I just don't think that's where I'm going to end up. And then by the time springtime rolled around and, needed to make a decision, I ended up choosing St. Louis University because I realized it was probably where I wanted to be the most. But I made that decision prior to COVID, I believe. So I had planned to go to SLU for chemistry. And was really excited about that. And then COVID hit, and after doing all the graduation and finishing up senior year, got into summer, Around midway through the summer, I decided I wanted to switch to psychology, which is what I got my degree in. So I did have a lot of just time to think because I was at home and didn't really have anything to do. And I got really interested in human behavior, especially following COVID and seeing the aftermath of everything that happened. Yeah, it became really interesting to me and started doing some reading and getting interested in different psychology related things. And so ended up switching right before I actually went to school. It was tough because I felt like the summer before college was supposed to be really exciting and, hanging out with friends and seeing them before you leave so that you kind of felt ready to go and meet new people and make new connections. And that just didn't really happen. I also think it's hard because that I felt like was supposed to be really formative for me. And the way I, spent the time before college was really going to set me up to take on college. But it was just a lot of uncertainty because, were we going to go to school? Were we going to be able to show up to class? Like, it just wasn't exactly what I had always thought it would be. I always hoped to go to college and kind of thought about, getting to grow up and be an adult, Yeah, I had just turned 18 in January before COVID happened. So I was an adult for a few months and then felt like I was thrown back into being a kid, stuck at home and couldn't go anywhere. So it was a lot of time to think, and it was definitely not what I expected. And it kind of felt actually showing up and moving into college was exciting, but it kind of felt like not at all what I had expected, at least. So it just kind of felt like I was, in the middle of the ocean trying to figure everything out, and no one can help me with this because no one in my family or anyone I knew had ever, gone to college as freshmen during a time where all of our classes were online. Our freshman orientation, you just sat in your room on your laptop. Like, our floor meetings were on our laptop. Like, you just could not. It was not normal, and it was not something that we'd ever done before. And so to not only be in a place, for me, I'd never, lived in St. Louis, lived on my own. So being in a place where I wasn't familiar and then doing all these things, it was exhausting to be constantly these new experiences and just taking them in stride. And at the same time, trying to get good grades.
Yeah, that was kind of my next question is like, was the past 4 years, and you kind of answered it, anything like you thought it was going to be, like, especially how your mom and I went to school and we tell you these stories about all the sorority stuff and the fun and the everything. And then you go and it's very flat. And the things people told me, like, for example, what you just said, the uncertainty, like, we're getting Grace ready to go to school and then we get an email that we're not letting freshmen move in and you're constantly pivoting. So you definitely felt that.
Yeah, it was hard for me mostly because my parents were very big on sharing those stories from their lives growing up. And it was something that was super helpful for me. I got to learn about them. I got to learn about, the different things that they did and the mistakes they made. And so I always heard their stories going to college, and, that was just not the reality that I was living. So it was a little difficult, just kind of felt like I was missing out on a lot of life that I thought I was supposed to experience. And I guess I kind of worried a little bit, like, how that was going to impact me. Again, I was studying psychology, so I knew there would be an impact. I just wasn't quite sure what would happen. But I think definitely that first year, because not only were we completely online, but they didn't want us to do the regularly scheduled breaks because they were quite often. And so if they were going to have people traveling so often, there was more risk for getting COVID. So instead of doing like a fall break and, Thanksgiving and spring break, instead we were there until November and then home for 3 months to take like a break. And so then people could come back, get tested, quarantine, that kind of thing, and then finish the year. So it didn't even really feel like going to college. It was like, oh, I went on this like fun little couple of months to this study thing, came home, didn't really have anything to do. Again, couldn't really go anywhere, and then go back and finish it out. And okay, that was my freshman year. It was just, again, not what anybody expected, and also hard to go from, okay, I'm independent, I live on my own, I do all my own things. Okay, but now for 3 months, I'm going to go back and live with my parents.
Yeah.
And just kidding, like, no more, and then go back and, oh, yeah, jump back into that same rhythm. It was just definitely difficult and didn't feel like college at first. Kind of just felt like, oh, this is a weird holding year.
Yeah. What about friendships? Like, do you feel that people around you or you yourself held on to high school relationships more or friendships, maybe a little trauma bonding? And also, you didn't have the opportunity to meet people, that explosive opportunity where everyone's in the same boat and open to new friendships. Do you feel like people held on more or?
Yeah, that was something that we talked about, honestly, my whole 4 years, is that my class in particular really was very cliquey and found that people either came to school with their high school friends and they stuck with their high school friends and, oh, they had a boyfriend. And so now they're high school friends and the boyfriend's friends, like now they're this big group and that's perfect. Or people who met on the first day because they were suite mates or on the same floor, just kind of stuck with those people and that was your group and you didn't really branch out. I mean, really, how could you? If these were people that you saw all the time, then that was just your kind of group. And I kind of thought that that would switch up after freshman year, and it didn't. It was still pretty much the same my sophomore year. And that's when things had started opening up a little bit more, and we could definitely socialize more. So I kind of thought it might change, but it still was really, again, cliquey. It was cliquey until about my senior year, and then people started kind of getting a little bit more friendly, more open to connection. But I definitely think it set us back, especially, I don't know, spending a summer like not really socializing and then coming to a place where you really have to socialize and make new friends. I think maybe people were just tired of working so hard to like find social connection. And once they found it, they just stuck with it.
Yeah. I heard like time and time again from both boys and girls that I interviewed, or men and women, that the mental lift for relationships was so tough because they were so isolated. And then, to have to psych yourself up to go be friendly and to go put yourself out there was just something that was sometimes too hard and required therapy. And it derailed a lot of people.
Definitely. And again, I had already decided that I was going through sorority recruitment before I got to college. And I had dismissed it for a long time because my mom was so interested in her sorority. And I was like, I'm not my mom. I don't whatever. And then kind of over the summer, it really solidified in me that, I'm going to a new place. I haven't socialized in a while. We're in this completely new, weird scenario. I need to actively put effort into making connections because otherwise I will be isolated for another year. That was not something that I felt that I could handle. I was like, I got to put myself out there and try and get something going here. So I went through recruitment, which was also on Zoom. So that was also nothing that I had expected. Just so keep about my mom's sorority experience and just talking. I mean, again, things change over time, but especially during COVID, it was, learning how to get your personality through a screen and talk to somebody and deal with tech issues and figure out your outfit that was going to look good from the chest up and try and, all these things that there was just not a rule book for it. There was nothing. You just kind of had to hope for the best. And my recruitment went well. It was definitely odd, but, we're working through it and just trying to make things happen, even in a very online world. But my bid day was online. I got an email. Yeah, I got an email with my bid and there was a whole animation. I screenshotted it and I was like, oh, at least this is cute. And my senior year, I made a scrapbook and I put a picture of the screenshot in it. So I was like, this is what I have. But to be fair, my senior year, when I was president, my advisor wrote me a physical bid card and gave it to me when I graduated. So there were ways to make it really special. And we did do a recreation bid day for all the seniors, again, on my senior year, which we had no idea about, but the president after me set it up and had everyone get bid cards.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so we got to do that, and I also ran home on the bid day of my senior year. I ran home with the new members. So it was fun. Like, I got to recreate some of those moments, and definitely people understood how important they were in building connection and building that positive experience. So definitely got back to it 4 years later. It was just getting through those tough couple of first years where I moved into our Greek life dorms and I hadn't met anybody that was going to be living next to me. I was in a single dorm and I left my door open and just hoping to meet people organically. And it did work, but it was really, especially for me, I find that I'm an introvert. And so just leaving my door open and hoping to like catch a conversation in the hallway that I could join in on or something like that. Yeah. Just meet people because I wasn't able to.
So you just mentioned some traditions, and that's one of the questions I have is like, because you didn't get, a real prom, a real graduation, and, the first traditions of college, how do you feel about traditions now? Are they something that you roll with the punches if they're not there, or have they become more important? Like, was your graduation from SLU, like, so important to you, or were you like, whatever? How do you feel about them?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult because, in prepping for my graduation, I just, again, felt like there was no playbook. I had never gone through like an actual graduation. I never waited in line, like waited in a group of people, gotten, the gown and and just like stood and waited to go on and walked across the stage. I didn't really know how to feel. And I think I was just kind of trying to block it out because remembering that I didn't have a high school graduation was tough in itself, just because I felt like, it was a reminder of all the hard work I had to put in to get to a life that was semi-normal again. And so, just going through this graduation as if, it was just business as usual. It's not, I don't know. It felt like everyone was just expecting it to just be normal. And for me, it definitely felt a little bit uncomfortable just because life had changed so much since the last time I was going through a graduation. But I felt like the only time I really felt it was when I was waiting on the ramp to get up to the stage to then walk across the stage. And I was like, oh, okay, like this is real. And I'm about to like graduate and get a diploma.
There's people in the audience.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is actually kind of a big room. It's like,
did they mention it at graduation?
Yes. So they did. They mentioned it in a few of the speeches. We had John Hamm speak at our graduation.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, him.
He's from St. Louis.
Okay.
So that was the kind of the connection there. But yeah, John Hamm.
Is he as good in person as he is on screen?
He did a really good job. And I mean, he mentioned COVID and just, getting through unprecedented times, that kind of thing. And then, like student speeches also brought up COVID and just how hard the transition was. And also like the transition to the COVID years, but then the transition out of it as well. And how like now we're supposed to, go about our lives and just, live normal. We didn't spend 4 years in kind of just this bubble.
So tell me, what do you feel has been the greatest lesson of the past 4 years for you?
It's a good question. And it's hard because I know how hard it is. But putting myself out there has never done me wrong, if that makes sense. Again, I went for the sorority thing. It was really hard for me, especially just because I hadn't been socializing. And so then to be really social and meet a bunch of different people was exhausting. I would come home and just lay on the floor of my dorm and eat ice cream and just like decompress. But it always got me closer to where I wanted to be. So yes, I struggled through joining a sorority. And then yes, I struggled through the next year of trying to meet the people in that sorority that I didn't meet. And, showing up to events, even if I really wasn't feeling it, getting past the fear of walking into something alone was really big for me as well. Again, all things that are important for just adult life, but just made harder by the fact that we were so isolated. So, and then continuing to put myself out there for vice president of the sorority and then get to be president. It was all really hard and nerve-wracking, and I stressed about it, but it got me closer to where I wanted to be, helped me, meet people, meet advisors, get great advice. Like, looking back, I'm like, wow, yeah, it was hard, but definitely worth it. And it's something that I have to keep reminding myself as, life gets harder, that putting in the work will pay off.
Getting uncomfortable. That is something I've heard from quite a few of you, is that a lot of people rose to the challenge of doing things alone, and some people did not. But I will tell you, especially as a woman and as somebody who has to walk into a room of 200, 300, 500 people every Saturday night and be friends with people, it is a skill that will never, ever steer you wrong.
Definitely.
Or to be able to go sit in a bar and eat dinner by yourself.
Definitely.
Huge skill set. So kudos to you.
It's also something that I think my mom set me up for. And I mean, she's, in my mind, very confident and outgoing, but she doesn't always want to be. And something that I've had to learn on my own is that, yeah, sometimes I don't really want to be doing these things, but it'll help me in the future. And, the people that always have someone to go do something with, that's great for them. But for me, it's really important to be able to go to a yoga class by myself, to be able to, eat at a restaurant, bring a book, do things by myself, and make myself a friend before I am going out and making other friends.
For sure. What do you think has been the greatest loss of the past 4 years? And it could be anything.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like the greatest loss would be that transition into adulthood. Again, I had turned 18 just a few months before COVID hit, and I guess there's a lot of expectations about turning 18, and suddenly you're an adult and you can vote and you can buy a scratch-off ticket if you were really interested in it. And COVID kind of made that feel like a fast track to adulthood, because not only was I now 18 and now all this stuff was happening, but I couldn't really explore who I was. I couldn't go out and do things. I couldn't meet with people. I wasn't at school, so I really wasn't learning the same as I was before. It just kind of felt like, okay, you're 18. Okay, now you're locked in the house. And now you have to make decisions about, what you think is right and all these things that, yes, you were always going to have to do, but it kind of just felt like fast track to all these decisions. And it just felt like, COVID kind of cut that off. And it was more about just trying to survive rather than developing who I was. And not that I never got to develop who I was, but I felt like it kind of had to take a pause on that and then come back to it later and do a lot of the work later when I had the ability to do more than just survive and get through the day.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe it stunted that. Not that I feel that it completely was missing, but I do think it's a loss that the people a year older than me, 2 years older than me, did not experience. I mean, just coming into finally meeting people at college, and they were a year above me, and they're telling me all these stories about their freshman year, and they're like, oh, I'm sure you experienced this, sure you experienced that. And everyone just kind of forgot that just because they weren't a freshman in college during that time, like other people were, and they had a different experience. So it got a little awkward, explain, oh, actually, no, like we didn't get to do that. And, oh, no, we didn't have that. And, oh, you went sledding? Yeah, no, we weren't allowed. We weren't even here when there was snow. Like, it was just all these things that like slowly coming back to you that you missed out on. And yeah, that was tough to realize coming out of it is, okay, yeah, now I'm living like a semi-normal life, but I'm kind of grieving all those experiences that I thought I would have.
Yeah, that is what you're saying is very common. And I was kind of shocked at how many people said their greatest loss, if they had lost someone, their greatest loss was part of their personality. That kind of really, I was like, wow, I didn't think about that. That who they thought they were going to be or could become, they couldn't do it.
Yeah. I felt like a lot of, turning 18, like, yes, you're legally an adult, but in your heart, you're still kind of a carefree teenager. And that kind of got taken away from us because it wasn't any longer. It's a time when I feel like you're a lot focused on yourself, and that's a good thing. You're trying to develop who you are, but suddenly you're being asked to think about everyone in the country, everyone at your school. You're being asked to think outside of yourself, which is a great skill to have. But when you're trying to figure out who you are, and now the focus is all on everybody else, you do kind of lose a bit of yourself.
Yeah. That's not natural for that age either.
Right.
Just very self-absorbed, for everyone. So when I went and was trying to come up with, how I was going to interview and what the interview was going to consist of, I looked towards, surely to God, there's academic research about this. And there is for little kids. And there was some research on the college graduates who graduated into a recession and couldn't find jobs. There was nothing about your age group. What I did find, though, was like more broad, the academics, as I call them, said that what you experienced was a trauma, like all of school kids, but what you experienced was a trauma. Do you think that trauma is a correct word to describe it, or that's too strong of a word? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've heard that before, and even from therapists who have said, it's a trauma. And at first, I kind of rejected that idea coming off from my sister passing away in high school and that happening to me before
real trauma. Yeah.
But at the same time, I do feel like I had to grieve the loss of myself from COVID the same way I had to grieve my sister, obviously in a different way and not as much, but definitely felt that same cycle of denial, rejection, acceptance, all those things, just not really knowing how to feel, not knowing how to handle it. And I definitely think it could be classed as a trauma. And I mean, there's lots of different types of trauma, and again, I know a lot of people talked about, who had it worse during COVID, and it was a lot of whose trauma was worse. And I don't think that's ever a good game to play. I think trauma is trauma and it affects you, and just take it as it is. No need to say, what's worse, what's better. But I definitely think it'll have a lasting impact. And that's, a major sign of trauma.
I would totally agree. Having lost your sister in high school, in talking about grief and trauma, did you feel like you didn't have a right to feel the things you were feeling because you've experienced at a young age real life-changing trauma? Like, and now you're going through this and you're like, well, I should be able to pull myself up by my bootstraps and keep going because this isn't as bad. But it was different.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of just stacked on top for me because I lost my sister freshman year, which I feel like is also a very formative time. Your
Freshman year of high school, right?
Yeah, freshman year of high school. It's definitely, I think, a very formative time. You're developing who you are. You're in high school. It's a big jump. Another year where I just felt like I was not developing myself. I was just working through everything that I had to work through. So then to come into COVID and have this happen again, it just felt like being hit while you're down. You're just, okay, add that on top to I still can't really figure out who I am because I'm feeling all these things about the world around me and trying to work through that before, thinking about myself, obviously put myself last because everybody tends to do that.
Right.
So yeah, for me, it felt like it stacked on top and made it even harder for me to get through the isolation of college. Again, just felt like I didn't really have a secure sense of self because I lost a part of who I was when my sister died, and then I lost another part of who I was. And it just made me really rethink my values, which again, like the building blocks of your sense of self, like what you believe in. Again, like I started thinking, okay, this COVID thing, if my sister were alive and she had epilepsy and special needs, she would have been very high risk for COVID. And how would I have reacted? And how would that have changed the situation? And thinking about people who I thought were friends that were then going out and having big parties during the time, I had to think about, okay, well, my values, I would want to keep my sister safe. And she's not alive, but that doesn't change the way I feel about that. And so seeing how my values then conflicted with people that I thought I was friends with, thought I connected with, shared the same ideas. Again, just a lot of thoughts, a lot of thoughts going around in my head that I had never really thought about before. Again, I was just mostly a selfish preteen and teenager before all of it hit, and just think about me and who I wanted to be. And then this all hit, and suddenly it was like a slap in the face of, okay, not everything's about you. And how are you going to handle that?
Yeah. Do you feel, because I kind of get the sense for you, like man, you've really gotten robbed of like being selfish, and you are allowed to be selfish in life.
Yes, that is something that I definitely recognized my senior year of college. Again, I had taken on full course load, a few part-time jobs, and then was vice president and president of my sorority. So a lot of my time was taken up. There was not a lot of time for me, and that's just kind of what I was used to. But it got really heavy to constantly be worrying about other people and other things. And I found that I really just had no time for myself at all. And that was not a way to live. But it was all I knew. But I slowly kind of had to, again, learn from those around me, but also learn from experience that taking a day off is taking a day off. Not that serious. Turning off your phone after 6 p.m. or whatever, like, not that serious. Like, I'm not an ER doctor. I am like, nothing's on fire. Everything's fine. Take a night off, take the weekend, that kind of thing. And it was really hard. It's really hard to relax when you've never really done it before, or, taking time for yourself, done things for yourself. But it was
Just
definitely
the focus be you. Like, you've never had the focus just be you.
Yeah, definitely. So it was a hard transition, and I feel like that was what even made it harder to develop as a person, is because there was no time for just me. It's something I still struggle with, and I think it'll be a continuing process of getting better at it, but I know how important it is, and it's kind of why I've felt drawn to things like yoga and reading and just very self-care focused things that you can schedule, because I'm a very scheduled person. So if I can schedule it, it's going to happen. And then that's done. That's out of sight, out of mind. I am taking care of myself, and it's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. When you guys graduate, right after you graduated high school, we moved into like this insane time to me of social issues being at the forefront. And, you went from Black Lives Matter to Me Too to Roe versus Wade, and then all this Palestine, Hamas, Israel stuff. Has all of that made you more sensitive and more of an activist, or has it desensitized you because it's all coming at you? And truthfully, what can you even do about it?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, which sounds weird to say, but yeah, I was coming into college during this time, and again, there wasn't a lot of socializing, but a lot of it was happening on social media. So we were seeing posts, we were seeing everything going on in the news. It was a constant barrage of things happening and feeling kind of powerless, but you were getting the updates and people were engaging with that content. And that inspired me. So my freshman year, it was right before election season, I joined a service opportunity where I wrote letters to communities that had low voter turnout and wrote letters encouraging them to vote. So it was just handwritten letters, hopefully to get, a more important. I see that they did that this past election as well, because I received a bunch of like handwritten postcards from people encouraging people to vote. So it's still like an ongoing initiative, but I definitely got involved with that because felt like I couldn't really do anything, but I could sit in my dorm bed and write letters to people and hopefully, encourage people to have their voices heard. And that encouraged me to start my minor in women and gender studies, do extensive research on everything that was happening, and trying to understand the world around me because so much was happening. So I definitely think it made me more interested in learning more and getting involved. But at the same time, it did get a little bit exhausting to put in the effort and just feel like another thing was just going to happen and another thing, and just feeling like nothing you were doing was enough. But again, that's just another realization of hard work. Getting the thing you want can take time, and you just have to work at it. But yeah, it was definitely social media had a big impact on it, but it also kind of changed the way you saw people, because you were on a college campus and maybe you were surrounded by a lot of people that had the same opinion as you, but you also were surrounded by people that had a completely different opinion than you. And so learning to coexist, definitely something, another important skill, but that was something that just kind of hit you right in the face.
So something I've heard time and time again, most of the people I interviewed said it desensitized them, like they were over it, and that they had to learn to pick and choose the causes that meant something to them. talk to me a little bit about the role social media plays in your life, and then what you see social media, how it affects your generation.
Yeah, so I actually did my capstone research project on how social media has impacted interpersonal relationships in Generation Z. Again, as you said, not a lot of research about my generation. Nobody really knows what's going on with us, but they love to look at Gen Alpha, love to look at millennials. But Gen Z, yeah, I think it's a little bit less research. And so that was something that I was interested in. And we interviewed lots of different people who started a business on social media that's our age and they're making tons of money. We had people who felt ostracized on social media, kind of just asked them a lot about how they think it impacted the way they make friends and the way they socialize. And a lot of them said that on the internet, you're allowed to be a lot more candid, mostly because you're hiding behind, a screen. But people are really honest and people leave brutal comments and people start fights. People that would never do that in the real world or in person. People that would most likely just kind of let it roll off their back instead online. When that's the only social interaction you're getting, you're really going to put all that energy into it. So it made for a place where, yes, there's a lot of connection because you can find people that have the same beliefs as you and feed off of that, but also you can feel really just completely disrespected from one comment or from one post from somebody and really take that to heart. So we found that it really changed the way people interacted in person. It really changed the way people hold on to relationships. So people aren't so quick to just let somebody has this opinion. Okay, that's fine. I'll still be their friend. It's kind of more like, oh, that's your opinion. We're done. We're through. I've seen people like you on social media. Like, this is not my thing, that kind of thing. Made people really decisive, but also really changed the fact that they could socialize really well online and then not be able to do it offline and not having those same social skills that, we were brought up with, but kind of just went out the window when you suddenly weren't allowed to be closer than 6 feet to somebody. You're wearing masks. The way you express yourself is a little bit different. So definitely from the research I did, again, yet small, a big impact from using mostly social media compared to socializing in person.
Yeah, you guys are the first digital natives, and you all got phones pretty early, middle school, beginning of high school, but definitely the apps were not what they are. Like, you still went outside and played. You still hung out with girlfriends on Friday nights and weren't all looking at your phone.
Yes, yeah.
You were doing things together. So it's interesting to hear you all talk about how you see the younger generations lack those social skills. And speaking of those social skills, some research I did come across was that your generation is having a heck of a lot less sex than we did. And what I hear time and time again, so I'm interested in what your experience was. And I know that you have a boyfriend. I don't know if you had one when you started school.
Yeah, so I went into college not wanting to be in a relationship. I knew I really wanted to focus on my studies and joining things and working on building my social circle before, finding somebody and then spending all my time with them. And I feel like a lot of people had the same idea. Again, we had been kind of locked up. It was time to, go out and meet people, but couldn't really. And so again, it happened in kind of those cliquey groups, but I mean, I do think that a lot less in-person interaction was happening, mostly just because it couldn't. So then it just became easy for people to hide behind their Snapchat screen or just meet someone on a night out and say, oh, what's your Snapchat, whatever. And then you add it and then, oh, now you're talking every day, you have a streak and whatever that means, just they added me to their private story. It means we're getting closer. Just weird markers of closeness and friendship that, just wasn't the same. Like in high school, you saw the same people every day and you just showed up. And then now you're in college and it's, oh, who are you Snapchatting? And, oh, this and this. And, oh, it's a Friday night and I'm going to just send a Snapchat asking where this guy's going to be and that kind of thing. Just very online. And then just being awkward in person because all your conversations have been online and that kind of thing. But I know for me, I kind of asked my boyfriend out, actually. So he didn't really, this was my sophomore, junior year. Just saw it. He was one of my friend's friends, saw him on a night out, thought he was cute. My friends talked to him and thought he was cool. My friend group kind of had the same opinion of not really liking to be online, but understanding that it's just kind of the way it had to be. So yeah, they talked to him and they're texting me like, you've got to meet this guy, like he's perfect for you, whatever. And so then I asked for his number. So I kind of did the thing. Again, I was really big on putting myself out there. And yeah, we've almost been dating for 3 years now. So obviously something went right, but it definitely was just more of an online, like everyone's just Snapchatting and it's who you're Snapchatting. And for me, now that I'm out of college, I don't use Snapchat at all. I never liked it in the first place, but it was, the means to an end.
You hate it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And that was the thing is I really tried to not be on my phone as much. And I found that I was missing out on a lot of socialization and people being like, oh, we're going to this bar. Oh, this person's hosting a party. This person, blah, 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 blah. It was all online. And so if you were taking a step back from that and trying to focus on, yourself, you missed out on that whole layer of socialization.
Right. On the opportunity to do some in-person stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think people my age or older people misunderstand about 22 and 23-year-olds today?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it happens with most generations that everyone thinks they had it harder than somebody else. And it goes back to that not comparing trauma and not comparing experiences because you never know someone's full perspective. Again, like you can look at me at school and just think, I'm a student or whatever, but you don't know that I've lost my sister and that I've moved countries several times and that, I went through this. Nobody knows your full story. And so there's no use in comparing things. And I think that kind of happens a lot with that generation, just being like, oh, well, we didn't have this and we couldn't just Google this. And when we had a school project, we had to go to the library and get a book. Like, we still have to do that. Like, things aren't that different. Like, they are different, but there are still some things that are the same and issues just evolve. They don't completely go away. So just, I think a really important thing for everyone, especially because I find myself kind of looking down on Gen Alpha and I need to correct myself and say, you know what, like they have grown up completely digitally. Let's talk about how that might have affected them and like that, take that as it is. So yeah, just really remembering that everyone has their own stuff and you cannot just make broad assumptions about any generation. And especially as everything is changing so quickly and new technology and all these things, like I think it's important for everyone to take a step back and just meet people where they are.
Because of what your degree is in, I'm curious to ask you this question because when I've asked this question before, the question I just asked you about how do we see your generation, quite a few people said that we don't understand that you have a higher ability to discern news because our generation grew up, we were fed, and it makes me a little sad now, like we had very common experiences. Everybody watched this show on Friday night. I mean, I remember in college in my dorm getting together with raw cookie dough. We all had our favorite raw cookie dough and watching like Moonlighting or whatever, like it was a thing. And you guys don't really have that. But also we were fed our news from Walter Cronkite, or Tom Brokaw. Like we had one source. And so what people have said is that you guys get, let's just take, Israel, Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
You can get very two different feeds on that. And you understand that they are extremely biased, where our age does not understand that. Like, if you're getting this horrible Gaza story, that it's from that, but you also need to go look and see what the other side of that is. I mean, do you have thoughts on that? Just because, especially because that's what you studied, psychology and.
Yeah, it's something that we also looked into in my capstone research is kind of like, how do you interact with the content that you're receiving? Because you're receiving so many different outlets. There are, you can get news on Instagram now. You can get news on YouTube. You can get news in a short form video that gives you a recap of what's been going on. And again, I think it might tie back to the fast track to growing up where we had to really think about our values and that kind of thing. And so now when we do interact with media, we take that into account and know that there are multiple forms and sources that we can get our news from. So I do think, especially with this past election, it's easy to tell who maybe didn't do a lot of growing up and maybe kind of stuck with their ways and just believes what their parents believe versus people who went to college and really started looking into themselves and what they actually believe and what they think is important. And again, like you said, choosing those causes that matter to you and knowing that you can't do everything, but you need to find something that you believe in and focus on that sometimes because there's so much going on. And it's, again, like we are not the first generation to go through a major life change. We didn't go through a war, but we are going through wars, plural. We, didn't go through Spanish flu. There's a lot of things that other generations went through, but I think it's important to look at how they were handled and how that impacted future generations. Focusing on my background in psychology, knowing that, with Great Depression and scarcity, we see how many people of that generation being hoarders or really holding on to things because they never knew if they were going to lose everything again. So let's talk about the mental impact of that. People kind of look at it as maybe a joke nowadays, or that, old people do this, or make generalizations. Then it goes back to the fact of not making generalizations, but also knowing that the trauma that other generations experienced had lasting impacts, and we only see them later, and we only think about them once they're too bad to really make a change about them. So we need to think about, okay, what did Gen Z have to go through? And then what is that going to mean for their adult lives? We're already seeing we're entering the workforce and there's different expectations about the workforce because of Gen Z. And there's been some pushback about that, but some people also agree with that change to maybe more work-life balance, focusing on yourself. And again, the world is constantly changing and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just looking at how is it going to change? And we know that it will change. And so making that transition smooth, I feel like, instead of completely rejecting change.
Talking about the workforce real quick, and then I just have one more question. I find this interesting, like that I wonder, your generation is very comfortable being isolated. Whether they realize they're comfortable or not, it's what you're used to now. As you emerged into adults, you very much were isolated and understood being by yourself and working by yourself and being self-motivated. And now all of this, like going back into the office thing. And, my son chose a career where that's not an option. Like remote work, working from home is not an option. He has to interact with people every day. And he loves it. And I wonder sometimes, or I'm curious, do you think that's a thing? Like, do you think that these kids, I don't really mean kids, but like not working in environments where you were among different generations and that sort of thing, that you're missing something because you're too comfortable being alone? Work-life balance, 100%. It's a little bit more important when you have a family and kids.
Right.
Because you have multiple demands. When your demand is only yourself, it's a little bit easier to figure that kind of thing out.
Yeah, and it's something I've been thinking about because I've also heard from a lot of people my age that working from home is hard because they don't have a separation of work and home.
As somebody who works on themselves, I will tell you that is factual.
Yeah. So I definitely think that's another issue as well, is like, yes, might make a lot more sense. I have more I don't have a commute, so I have more time for myself. And as a generation that lost a lot of their time, it's something that's really important to them. So again, we see those values that have been built because they had to be. So it's hard because, yes, there's a lot of benefits to working from home. And if you kind of set up a world where you were able to do everything from home for the past how many years, and now you're supposed to go back to the office and you didn't build those skills were not built.
Yeah, we talking about like transition.
We were told to stay at home and sit behind a screen. And now you're saying, no, we need to be in person. And I personally think that being in person can be easier, just conversation can flow more naturally. You get to know people a little bit better. You have those side conversations, the water cooler conversations, those kind of things that
you make work friends.
Yeah. So I think it's a tough transition, and we'll keep seeing some return to office things. It'll be a tough transition, but again, it's something that Gen Z has done before, and it'll just be, learning new skills, but also bringing new perspectives to the workplace and changing it for the better, because knowing that maybe more flexible work hours could, make people still want to be in person, but get their life back. Or, just getting used to being in person again might just take a little bit of time. And
yeah, or even learning how to communicate in a workforce, where you have to. Some of you that graduated, and then the college class of 2020, because I knew a few of them, and to have to start a job remote.
It was hard. It's definitely because I started a job remote, and it felt anticlimactic again. It just a lot of things that were so built up, and I always imagine, starting my first job out of college and being so adult and so grown up, and I was just sitting in my home waiting for my computer to turn on. It was just, I don't know if it's just a lot of expectations that were built up by our parents and just hearing their stories that made it so hard to then see this completely new direction that it was going. But it's definitely weird. But there are benefits and drawbacks to everything, and it's something that we're just gonna have to work out.
Just even little things like I met my husband at work, if you're not there, you don't get to do that kind of thing. Or even, like I said, watching Grayson, he's on his first work trip, but the first week they're like, oh, every Friday we go to lunch. Sometimes we come back from lunch, sometimes we stay out, and I hate that. I love that for him, but I hate that people would miss out on that, because it's, it's kind of fun. It's kind of like the Swarmy thing, right? You've got to get yourself out there. And okay, so is there anything you can think of that we did not talk about that you want to talk about?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I do think that last point you brought up, my parents always talked about, going out after work, or my dad, when they played pool on Thursday nights, or they went to the bar. So that's just another element of socialization, and that third place that they talk about for our generation that is online now. And that's maybe another thing that older generations don't understand, is that we are connecting as a generation. It's just a different format, and it all is happening online. So when you say, oh, you're always on that phone or whatever, well, was it for you? Oh, you're never home. You're always out with those friends, that kind of thing. Right. It's the same complaints, just a different format. So I think and I personally like to interact more in person, but acknowledging that that's kind of the way it's been, and we just got to try our best.
Yeah, and it's not going to go back. Okay, last question. What are you going to do with your one big life, Caitlin? When you're your mom's age or my age, and you look back, what are you going to say? Oh, check the box, I did it. And it could be anything.
Yeah, and this is something that's tough, because I've had to do, a lot of soul searching, a lot of figuring out who I was in kind of a short amount of time, and obviously still working on it, still young, still got time. But I really found the most fulfillment in connecting with people on a deeper level. I find that, I'm an introvert. I'm not into, I'll present in front of a group, but I'm much more comfortable having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, getting to know them, learning about their life, learning about their experiences. To me, that's what life is all about. And sitting down, sharing stories, eating good food. At the end of the day, there are some things that are going to make life feel worth living. And for me, it's definitely, just connecting with people and feeling like I'm really living life, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. Totally on a personal level. Will you ever move back to Europe? How do you feel?
That's a good question. I get asked that all the time. And I don't know. I went back and visited this past summer, and, got to see my old apartment in France, and I got to see an old friend from Sweden, and my boyfriend came with me, and he met her. And after we left, he was like, I've never seen you so much like yourself, and just so really me and getting to just be myself and not have to worry about anything. And it really took me back to, a simpler time of, being younger and you're just who you are and you don't really care. And I feel like being in Europe definitely kind of feels like a reset for me. Especially I didn't spend COVID over there. So for me, like, it was weird to see like QR codes on the restaurant tables because I was like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, this is not what I remember. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed being back in Europe and just kind of definitely feeling more like myself.
Honestly, did it feel a little bit like home?
Yeah, definitely. Which is, tough reality coming back. But I really feel like any place can be home if you find those people that make it home. So just working on building that here, and yeah, maybe someday going back. Who knows? Who knows where my life will take me?
Could be. Do you speak French?
I do. It's funny. I do. And so while I was in Paris, I was translating for my boyfriend who does not speak French. I'm definitely a little rusty. So I picked up Duolingo and I have a 217-day streak. I'm working on that French. So no one wants to practice with me.
Your mom doesn't speak, does she? I don't think she ever.
No. She can like manage herself at a grocery store or that kind of thing. It just, yeah. So, and my dad can do like work French. So I just do Duolingo.
Real life French. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
And thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening to Laying Fallow. Be sure to listen to the rest of the episodes, and to learn more and see the portraits from both 2020 and 2024, head over to my website, www.donnavonbruning.com, or to my Instagram, @DonnaVonBruning.